Welcome to Drop Pod, episode 19. Welcome, everybody. I wanted to start by talking a little bit about Helldivers because I played it. And what I played, for the most part, I enjoyed, but I feel like Helldivers still suffers from the same problems that made me stop playing it to begin with. On stream, I was a little bit discombobulated, I'll admit, because I haven't played it in a while. After stream, I would try to get back in the swing of things, and I was just noticing the same issues glaring. I feel like weapons still don't have much staying power because Arrowhead keeps opting to nerf something, kind of undeservedly. I would take a look at their Discord and the correspondence that I'm seeing and the dialogue that I'm seeing between Arrowhead devs and then the player base just seems to be on the air of like, hey, this is our vision for the game. Meanwhile, the players don't really understand that vision for the game. They had nerfed the incendiary breaker, which is a shotgun in the game that uses, flame shells. And people really didn't like that nerf, especially because the upcoming patch for the game was going to introduce more flame weapons. And now flame damage is nerfed, and one of the big heavy hitters for the flame weapons are nerfed. And people thought, wow, this is not good, especially because you didn't commit to these changes for the enemies. You kind of just screwed us over. And people were very unhappy about that. My problem with Helldivers 2 has always been, I think the game is good, but the game gets stale. After a certain point, you kind of just, you've seen it all. There's not enough variety in what the game is, despite it being this huge, sprawling, internal war. Once we got done with the first, major, war set. And then we were like, all right, what's happening now? What are we doing? And then the game had just kind of reset. We had defeated the Terminids, I think within the first month of the game being out, and everybody was like, oh, sick, we did it. And then, I don't know, it's a week or two later, and then the Terminids are back. We kind of just saw everything. It was like, all right, well, we complete the war, the game resets. Now, here comes a new set of challenges with the same locales, the same mission sets that we've been seeing. I think skill expression is not really there. And people are going to say, oh, well, it's a PvE game. Why should there be skill expression? It's not a good precedent to set for your game if one option is viable. I've always hated that in the modern era of games. And you can say, oh, well, that's why I just don't engage with it, but it's the nature of the beast. You may not be engaging with it, but the people you play with might be. The people you queue up with might be. It used to be that you just pick up a game and you just play it. But nowadays, everything is kind of in your face in terms of the algorithm showing you what you need to be doing at any given point. There's a new weapon inside of Destiny 2. This is the best weapon. If you are not using that weapon, you are trolling. On a YouTube video, you might see, here's the best way to do X, Y, and Z. Here's the best build for this current season. Here's the Warframe you should be playing right now in this patch. It's hard to avoid this sort of stuff because, again, you may not be interacting with it, but then you get into the game and you notice that people are. It's a hard thing to wrap your head around. Devs need to figure out what their vision of the game is, while also, especially if it's a live service, and that's where the water gets muddy, very much so. If I have a vision for the game, I want players to use their stratagems, but the players are saying, well, we can't really use our stratagems, especially in these higher tier difficulties. You guys make it difficult on us to use stratagems, especially when you have modifiers that remove a stratagem slot from us. And it's like, okay, well, now I have to depend on these cheesier tactics, and I have to depend on the absolute meta dominant weapon, because anything less than that, and now I'm suddenly not competitive enough to play this higher tier difficulty. There's been some buzz around it's one of the dev streams, and I think they had 2 people from PlayStation and then 2 people from Arrowhead kind of just talk about the upcoming patch and the upcoming Warbond, the seasonal model for the game. And there was a lot of talk about it's obvious that Arrowhead doesn't play their own game, because look at the skill expression from the 2 devs that were playing weren't very good. I feel bad because there's a whole discussion about, should the dev teams be outrageously good at their games, and there's never an in between. Like we've seen devs from like Final Fantasy show some gameplay sets, and they're absolute gods at the game, and then you go to Halo, and during the Bungie era, and we were seeing Vidocs of when Halo 2 was made, and everything was like it was chill, it was casual. The skill expression, especially back then in the mid 2000s, it just wasn't there. Hell, skill expression itself wasn't really a viable term until the turn of the 2010s. Suddenly everybody is able to record themselves and show off what they know, and information gets passed so quickly. It's interesting when you're watching videos. You might see it on your feed every now and then, and the fact that I'm even mentioning this now, good luck to your trending page or what the algorithm gives you, but you'll see videos of people mentioning like why games aren't fun anymore, and part of the reason is the whole you feel like you need to be dominant 100% of the time. The social aspect of games have gone to the way of Discord calls and fringe groups that you will never be a part of. That's crazy to think about. It wasn't too long ago when you'd get into a lobby and you would make connections with people in the lobbies that you're in. So most friendships are formed in the online space. But with the way things are nowadays, you join an LFG. LFG invites you over to a Discord or what have you, and if you're lucky, you hang out, you stick around. Otherwise, you feel like you're third wheeling it, which is a problem I felt during COVID when I was doing Destiny 2 content. This was something that was constantly weighing on me. I hope the people that we bring in to the crew feel like included, and they don't feel like they're just here to be here because we invited them for raid activities or whatever we were doing. I remember there was a fellow that had happened by the server at the time. We had like a full like team for raids or whatever inside of Destiny 2, and there was this one guy that's and he was cool. We never had a problem with him. It's just that he would try to hang out, and it was obvious that we had like the full set of people. So you would try to hang out, and that wasn't really going to happen because Destiny 2's the way that everything is set up. Uh, you're either going to be in a 3-man squad or you're going to be in a 6-man. At the time, that was just the nature of what it was. Most of the time, you're going to be in a 3-man group because the activities inside of Destiny 2 call for 3-person fire teams. This individual would confide in, forget who was with me at the time, but it was me and somebody else from the group. And he would say verbatim that it's obvious that you guys just kind of have like the main crew. And at the time, it was head scratching for me, but I understood later on down the road that there was no way for this individual to like join in on activity if you had the usual suspects just doing what they do. And it's not to blame these individuals at all, because I mean, we're a tight knit group. Most of the time when we bring somebody in, it was because one person couldn't make it to a raid, and we're not going to hold that against them. Everybody has things they need to do. And I just find those sort of aspects interesting because I've never been in a position where like I felt like, oh man, I'm really third wheeling it right now in somebody else's server. I don't know how you fix social aspects in games. I can complain about it until I perish, but it's not going to solve anything, and I don't think you can really solve it. Things are too fringe nowadays. You can just go to your own group and nobody will hear a peep from you, but people move on eventually. And then when those people move on, what happens then? Because now you're out of a group. You need to find a different one. What do? Somebody in the server had brought up something that's I understand entirely. I forget who. Excuse me. I forget who. But they had brought up that, they met a lot of their friends on Destiny 2, and they don't like Destiny 2, but they play it. At the time, this was during Lightfall, and Lightfall was the most atrocious pile of shit that we had ever seen. They would explain that if they were to stop playing Destiny, they feel like they would just lose those friendships that they've made. And I understand, completely, especially from the content creator side, when people were watching you for a specific set of content and then you no longer do that content, you kind of just alienated those individuals that happened by. And it's no different from just being, social in general. So I understand, but there's also that part of me that, if you, reminds me of, being in school, and you would have that friend group that you would hang out with, but that was only in school. Those are your school friends. Those aren't your chums that you're hanging out with just full time. That's not to say that doesn't happen. That's how you're supposed to do it, make friends, and those relationships should continue outside of school. But you have that group, and you guys are the best of friends, but that's in school. And I feel like it's no different in the gaming space either. You have those set of friends, but they are only your set of friends when you're playing this or you're doing that. And there's nothing wrong with that, but at the same time, if those are the sort of relationships that I'm not too, interested in. If my cause for being in your circle is because I contribute to this one aspect, then I'm more or less not too concerned. Content creation wise, I feel like that's more or less the same, especially when you're, a variety streamer like me. It's a hard balance because at times you don't want to disappoint anybody with what you're doing. The Elden Ring streams that I was doing were probably like some of the better stuff I was doing over the year, especially because people were, complaining that I really needed to play this DLC, and I think I played my hand correctly enough. When you have friends that stream the game and you're looking at it and it's like, okay, well, most of my viewership is, shared by a few of these individuals. I'm not going to do the thing that they're doing, especially if it's not really going to go anywhere. So at that point, it's a waste of time. And people that are doing Twitch as like a career move, they're going to do the following, and it happens every time. It doesn't matter who you are, but you're going to look up, as you should, if you want to know what you're doing. You're going to research. But there's an aspect to like streaming that people just like really don't get, and it's like, if you're a small time streamer and you're not pollinating anywhere else, you're only on Twitch, you're never going to grow, like ever. It doesn't matter how long you're streaming for, you're not going to grow that way. You might get the occasional, couple of follows every couple of streams or what have you, but in the grand scheme of things, especially if you're in my neck of the woods where you had a huge following, but then you stopped, it's hard to just go, okay, yeah, no, I'm just going to stream, and then every single one of these people are going to, come back to watch. That's not how it works. I like to term things as you are exercising a muscle with whatever you decide to do. And when you decide to stop using that muscle, you need to regain that. And I think that applies to literally anything, whether it's gaming. Muscle memory is very important for a lot of avenues to stay competitive or, show your skill. I don't think that's any different than, working out per se. Riding a bike, writing. You stop doing something, eventually you're going to forget how to do that, or at least do it effectively. That's my feel, though. When this episode releases, you guys are going to probably have seen all of the reviews for the Borderlands film. Borderlands was a series that it was never truly like anything on my radar. I enjoyed Borderlands 2 well enough, and when the Game Informer article released for Borderlands 1, I was like, oh, that's a pretty neat art style, but it was never something that I was like, oh yeah, no, I need to have this. Even as a kid, I was never like too interested in the comedy of the game. I didn't really care for like any of the tropes or the writing in general. I just thought it was silly, kind of boring. I've always hated those sort of games where, especially if it's like a first-person shooter. I complained about this during the Far Cry 5 stream that I did with one of the crew members, would have been in 2022. But I complained that I don't like when there's a character that is introduced in the game and they give you, like a quest or whatever. You're going on this quest, and for some reason, this character just happens to know what you are doing at the exact time that you're doing it. They're constantly in your ear. Like, I've never understood that. And, you're playing a game, so it is what it is. Like, you're supposed to suspend your disbelief, but I can only suspend it so much. Like, why does this individual just know immediately what I'm looking for when I pick something up, for instance? It's one thing if like, oh, well, I'll stay here and monitor the security cams while you go in and pick up the MacGuffin. But it's never like that. In most situations, they just kind of know what you're doing. And that's what Borderlands does. They have this character and they're constantly yapping at you. They're scripted sequences when you do something and you interact with an object, and for some reason the character is yapping at you, even though you had just picked up this object. And it's like, let me do the quest and let me get back to you with the quest item or, whatever I'm doing here. I don't need you in my ear 24/7. And even as a kid, I was like that. I was like, dude, what are we doing? What are we talking about right now? So far, that's the only situation when I've seen this work. It's like, oh well, yeah, I'll be on the security cams and I'll try to guide you every step of the way. It's like, all right, fair enough. But what about Mess Eye of Sauron back there that just knows what I'm doing at the exact time code? Borderlands 2 release and everybody was like hot on their trails for Borderlands 2. Borderlands 2, for the most part, was fun. I enjoyed the gunplay, but I've always hated like Borderlands like dialogue and writing. I never really found any of the jokes to like really land, and I don't know, call me jaded. You're talking to the horror guy, but it's a lot of the stuff is just a lot of crude humor. It's like stuff that you'd expect that sort of age group to find it funny, but I never did. Borderlands 3 released, and I think that's when a lot of people kind of jumped over to this camp. It's like, dude, the writing is so bad. It's so bad. The first week of Borderlands 3 releasing, I remember looking at a video on how to fix the audio. So yeah, there were some audio issues, but this fix was how to turn off the dialogue for the game, for the remainder of the game. Borderlands 3 had like the most unlikable cast of characters. I'm not even talking about the player characters really. Like they're unremarkable as far as what they are. You have like the only person I remember is Sun Wong's character, Flack, the like robot, the Beastmaster. But I could not. I don't remember any of the other characters. Some of the DLC were pretty good and reintroduced characters because I feel like that's what you do when you know your player base is kind of on fatigue. So you kind of have to put in that little nostalgia. They're like, oh yeah, remember that? Remember when we were doing this in this game way back when? So the Borderlands movie released, and I've tried to watch this movie. I don't want to see it in theaters, but I wanted to see it because IGN gave this movie a 3. They gave it a 3. IGN. They're known for giving, fives to anything they find mediocre because, one, they don't want to lose, any reviewer codes or whatever they got, going on behind the scenes. But they gave the movie a 3, which is insane. I've been looking at the turmoil on Twitter and noticed Randy Pitchford has been muting and blocking people, which is kind of a shame because you are kind of the face of like, that product, that IP. And I get it. At the end of the, like, I wouldn't want to hear from thousands of people telling me that this creation out here, like, this is garbage. Like, this is bad. I wouldn't want to hear that. I wouldn't want to hear people insulting my character and not just talking about the film. I get that. I understand. I'm not saying that's what everybody is doing, but there's bad actors and everything. In any aspect of life, there's going to be those people that will take things a little too far. So I would understand that Randy's like, yeah, okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 times already. Like, no. We got to nip this in the bud. Some of it, yeah, sure, you could say it's warranted, but then there's a reviewer by the name of Paul Tassi who's like our guy for Destiny 2. Anything that's Destiny 2 coverage, you're typically looking at an article from Paul. And Paul was talking about the movie, and he would end up getting blocked by Randy. He would go on in a video saying like, "Hey, I'm not going to discuss anything that's happening. Whatever happened, it happened." Which, I mean, yeah, that's a good high road to take, I think. But it's just so strange on both sides, on both parts. Like I think there's constructive criticism that you can do, but I don't think that that should be followed up by any insults on the person themselves. It's like, yeah, and you're welcome to be upset for sure, but that shouldn't be at the expense of dev teams or people that are, putting out the content. Let's keep the arguments to the content itself and not, what the people are. I really want to watch this film, and I'm probably going to have to wait until it comes out because I really don't want to see it. I went from watching a really good film in Deadpool in theaters. I don't want to muddy the movie going experience by by going to watch this film. That's just not in the cards. Drop pod. It's another cutaway. Told you guys during the alternate episode 17B. It's a way that I can separate the episode for different topics. Been receiving a lot of comments lately. I really appreciate all of the correspondence that you guys give. And I need to say this every now and then. It's hard when you're introverted to all hell. You don't want to subvert expectations of what you're doing and why you're doing it. So when I put out something, especially as a creator, there's this whole thing of like I don't think what I'm putting out here is like sufficient enough. And I think that happens with whatever you do, whether it's writing, singing, and even, what I do in terms of being a video game personality. I don't think that it's any different, really. So when I put out something and there's no static on like, hey, this is one of the worst ideas. It's one of the worst ideas you've ever come up with in your life. You should reconsider your life choices heavily. Over the weekend, I went to play Halo. Halo is like a very important franchise in my life because it's, the franchise I grew up with. And I'm not too happy with a lot of the things that 343 does, but Halo Infinite's in a good spot, at least nowadays, relatively. They finally added back most of the modes that have been missing from this game. We're finally able to, 3 years later, mix and match the armor pieces to the different armor cores in the game. Can finally play firefight. It's like things that should have just been there are finally there. It's like every time that I come back to Halo, it's always like a breath of fresh air. I'm like, oh man, this is like really fun. And then I stop playing it, not because I get bored or anything, but just because there's so many other things like going on. It's like, oh, well, we got this Destiny 2 patch coming out. We got the Elden Ring DLC coming out right now. This new game is on the horizon. So most of the time when I come back to Halo, it's like, okay, well, I'm playing this just until something big comes out, and I feel like I'm doing it again because in a few short weeks, I got that Space Marine 2. And Space Marine 2 looks incredible. I can't wait to cover that. I feel like that it's what we wanted out of like a Dark Tide sort of game. Yeah, but Halo's been fun, and I think if you've ever been interested in Halo, now is the time to try it out. Multiplayer is still free. Which, it was a very surprising move by Microsoft, but I think that was like the right move to make, is to make this a free to play experience. We talked about it last week with Concord, but Concord released it's beta, and people were not interested in this game, and I think it's only going to remain so because you have to fork over the money for it. It's a game that's, for the most part, going to be a competitive experience. It's not really like, oh, let's tell our friends to buy this and have them study and focus up on a meta that they don't care about for however long we're going to play this. Lethal Company, games like that, those sort of like party games that you play, you kind of just put down after a while. Those experiences, those are fine because they're typically in like the AA threshold of like $20 or so, $10 at most, or sorry, $10 at the least rather. So it's like, it's not the worst thing that's going to happen if everybody just stops playing this one day. But then game like Concord, that's asking for a premium. It's like, yeah, no, I'm not. No. So I think Halo, for the most part, did that right. It's just that that game needed a lot more time. I mean, no, look at Stalker and all of their setbacks. They've been pushing that game back since I Can Walk or Talk. I hope Stalker 2 is good. I think they went, which is fair, and you kind of have to, especially when you put so much time into a project like this. You kind of want this to reach as many people as you can. But I think they went a little too casual with this game from what I've been seeing in the trailers, and I'm kind of worried about that. Just from the attack shooter perspective, those are the sort of shooter games that I play mainly, and it's like I'm looking at the reloads and I'm looking at just the general gunplay, and I like Stalker because it had this elements of like milsim, which interested me more so than like the survival aspect, and the gunplay just feels so like over the top sometimes. So I'm really hoping that my worries are like unfounded, but I know for like a lot of the gun nut guys, especially from what I was seeing on Twitter, people were not very thrilled about what they were seeing in terms of like the animation work for the reloads and just the general look of the gunplay. They think like, oh, this is going to be a game it's definitely going to reach a lot more casuals than it does, the original fan base. Which, yeah, I mean, you make a second game, you're going to want that game to do as well as it can. I think that's what a lot of people don't get either about just modern day game dev. There was a report put out, I forget if it was Bloomberg, but they were talking about Bungie and Marathon and Destiny 2's player base. They're aging. A lot of the veterans of this game and the community renowned people like Dado, who's been around since Ground Zero. Folks like Vlad, Fallout, like these are guys that have been around for like ever. They're older people. I mean, we all are, but they're older community members. And with Marathon being what it is, it's like we kind of want to reach a new audience, which sounds bad to say, but it just seems like Marathon is not going to be for the people that were into Destiny 2, that were into Destiny overall. It's just this is not going to be your space. And we're going to give Marathon a fair shake. There is so much inner turmoil going on with this game. Like, I'm not even sure what it is anymore. Because at first we just thought, okay, it's an extraction shooter with Bungie DNA. But now we're getting reports that, well, it's going to be a hero shooter now. And it's like their internal testing and people that are coming out of these internal tests that are just kind of haphazardly talking about it. They're not even like really saying it in an official capacity, but like, oh, well, I was invited to come play test the build, and people are just not too thrilled about it. There's a podcast ran by Skill Up called Friends Per Second, who had Jason Schreier, who's been covering Destiny related news for literally ever. And Jason was talking with the podcast crew about just stuff that he's heard through the grapevine about Marathon, and I recommend giving it a watch because it's a pretty good episode. They also had the crew from Game Informer kind of talk about like what the next steps are and just remembering Game Informer for what it is. I'm hoping for a lot out of Marathon because I like Marathon. I think Marathon is it's one of those cult classics. It didn't really have like the following that something like Wolfenstein or Doom had because those were the games it was competing with, and this, that, and the other. But like at its core, that's like Bungie, and I think especially now that it's free, you can definitely play Marathon for free now. You don't have to do some like dodgy download an open source whatever. You can go on Steam and download it completely for free. I'm gonna level with you guys right now. This is like completely off topic. In every episode of Drop Pod that you can catch here on YouTube, possibly Spotify, once I pay for the hosting, I finally caved. Once the show's in the position that I need it to be in, we're getting more views per episode, which is good. So it felt like it's the show's there, and I'm pretty sure once the channel grows a little bit more, people are gonna look through the videos and watch a few episodes of the podcast and go, oh, I need more of this, and go back to when we were like absolute cringe in seasons 1 and 2. Not to say that I'm not cringe now, but at least there's production value. Anyway, in the past few episodes, you guys might have heard my clock going off. I had like this nice little like bird clock, and when the next hour passes, you guys might hear like a bird chirp out of the clock, and like I thought the clock was like cute, but because like the bird pops out or whatever, and then it chirps, and then that's it. Next hour, good luck. I cannot turn off the bird. The bird is like bonjour, and it comes out of like the clock, and then it goes back in, and it does like these really loud chirps, and I can't turn it off. So that's a little Easter egg for you guys. Let me know if you've heard the chirp so far this episode, or any other episode. It'll be like our little game, be our little secret. No, I'm not going to cut out the chirps. I'm going to let you guys know of my failings. It's crazy that we're almost on episode 20. For episode 20, I think I will bring either a guest, or I'll bring Mala back next week as a host. I'll see if he even wants to do that. Chances are he will. Chances are he doesn't, though. Who knows? But I'm assuming he'd want to. I said on one of his streams the other night that it's like I kind of just want to make sure I'm like consistent in the upload schedule, and so far I have been testing out like when's the best time to release something like a talk show, and just in general, what's my release window, especially since I release these on a Tuesday. Initially the reason was Tuesdays are usually like a reset period for a lot of games, whether that's WoW, Destiny 2. Usually their reset periods would be on a Tuesday. So I was like, oh, okay, that would be like a good time. People are logging in to, do their weekly grinds. So I chose Tuesday. But now that I'm back in the swing of things in terms of content creation, I'm now looking into, I'm not going to change the day that the episode's released. They're still going to be on Tuesdays. That is, unless something happens to this episode. I don't know why it would. I'm not going to put that out there, but it's supposed to release Tuesdays. Hold me to that. Keep me honest. Drop pod. I'm going to have a recording of that. Just me saying drop pod, because I do it differently every time. And it's meant to separate the episode into segments, which helps me out as the host, you know? And if you don't, these things happen. Show of hands, dear listeners, how many of you guys have played Dragon's Dogma 2? I have not heard a peep about this game until ritually last night, and I didn't know if I even wanted to discuss Dragon's Dogma 2, but might as well do it. Why not? I stopped playing Dragon's Dogma 2 because I didn't want my experience to be muddied. The performance issues were just getting too much to the point where it's like, okay, I can't even ignore this. I by no means have like a decent enough rig anymore. I'm going to upgrade pretty soon here. I'm still running a 2070 Super, which was fine when, ray tracing was like this new thing during COVID and everything was like brand new in that space. Cyberpunk had just released. It's like the game looked gorgeous. But I feel like my gripe with Dragon's Dogma 2 for the most part was just the lack of optimization in a lot of the areas. You had NPCs that were popping in. You go into a town and, most of the areas that you were in were like 90 FPS, if that. And then you go into a town and all of a sudden you're dipping out down to the 30s. And it's like, dude, what do I have to do here? The lack of enemy variation kind of bothered me too, because there was a lot of stuff that they showed during like the development trailers and just the trailers in general, and then we didn't see any of those enemies. And I feel like, unfortunately, because they did this with the last game, a lot of this stuff is going to be addressed when a DLC comes out, which we still haven't heard hide nor hair about any DLC content, but we know it's coming. You don't release a game that big in scale and scope and then just go, we're not, all of that unreleased content that we had, like, we're not even gonna worry about it. The game was fun. I've had a few of you guys message me that the game isn't very good, which is it's interesting because I like the freedom. I like the expansiveness of it. I like it's one of the first games that like made me not really worry about fast traveling, because like, you're always getting into like some sort of action as you're like walking down, or you get to enjoy the vistas. And I think that it like people that enjoy those sort of like experiences are gonna get a lot more mileage out of a game like this. Because if you give me some free use like fast travel token, I'm using that like 100%, 2 billion%. But during the first couple of nights of playing Dragon's Dogma 2, like I wasn't doing that. I was just soaking in the ambience, walking with my party, going to all of these locations. It doesn't work on like subsequent playthroughs, which not to say that I've done that yet, but I'm pretty sure that that's not going to be a thing people are really going to enjoy. I know that for Dark Arisen, they had to add this unlimited use fast travel token because like I've already did my time. Like, I'm good. I'm chilling. I feel like they're going to do the same thing here. One of you had messaged me that like, I don't know what you see in this game. I'm just like, I like the expansiveness of it. I like the classes. I like the general vibe of Dragon's Dogma. I think it's cool when you're doing these like large pitch battles and then all of a sudden there's a dragon. You have a party. It's not like, Skyrim. You just have like the one follower and you can find a dragon, but there's like so much more like class expression inside of Dragon's Dogma 2 than there is inside of Skyrim, unless there's mods. Fun fact, Skyrim decided to do away with the idea of classes for some reason. You can't be Ragnar the thief. It's like, no, you're just Ragnar. You're Ragnar with the bow that somehow became a stealth archer. Because that's just what you do. I brought up Dragon's Dogma 2 initially because apparently there's been optimization patches for the game, and I'm like hesitant on going back to the game. Apparently the game is a lot better, especially on consoles. Like, it is crazy to me that you can put a game out these days. It doesn't have to be optimized. It doesn't even have to be finished in the AAA space. And we let Capcom off with warnings because so far Capcom they've been on it. It's like banger after banger after banger, aside from Resident Evil 3. Aside from Exoprimal. But banger after banger after banger. People are kind of worried about Dead Rising. I saw a video come out from Spear Hunter the other night, and like that, you know it's a problem when like the Capcom, content creator is telling you like, I'm worried about this game. That is not a good sign. That's the doctor coming back with like your test results and going, we got to have a talk. It's like, yeah, no. I got back into Dead Rising a little bit, especially with the talk of like Dead Rising 1 just having a remaster. I think of out of like any of like the Capcom games that could get a remaster, like, Dead Rising 1 would be pretty fun, especially with like the advancements over the Dead Rising franchise. It's a shame what happened to Capcom Vancouver, but you guys mess with the formula a little bit too much. You knew that players weren't, they had one thing correct, and they knew that players were going to be like fatigued from the franchise of just, all right, here, we're bringing back this setting. We can't let Frank West just die. For some reason, Capcom was like so invested in this character. And I think Vancouver had the right idea with Dead Rising 2 of just like, let's have a new protagonist. Frank's story is done for the most part. And it's not to say that he can't come back later, like a Resident Evil sort of deal where, we're flip-flopping between Chris and Leon and Claire and all this. But I think Vancouver had the right idea. But it was just Capcom like kept stepping in and saying like, no, Frank West is our guy. Like, keep doing Frank West stuff. If you guys stop doing Frank West stuff, we're going to have a problem. And so Dead Rising 3 happened. And then Capcom was like, hey, what did I say about not including Frank West? I don't think you guys know the situation you're in. But if I don't see Frank West, I'm going to show you what that problem is. And then Dead Rising 4 happened. And then Vancouver got shut down. Hey, I'm glad that you guys put Frank West in the game. I'm so happy. You guys did a great job. And I'm so happy that you did that. But you guys made a terrible, terrible game. I can't have that look bad on the company. And not only that, you guys lost us a lot of money. So I'm going to shut you guys down. Okay? But hey, we had a good run. Not bad for a company that never developed like any sort of action game before Dead Rising either. They just kind of like came up. Like, yeah, no, we'll spearhead this franchise for 2 console generations. Yeah, sure. I forget what Vancouver had called themselves before they were Capcom Vancouver. I forget what game they had worked on, but it definitely wasn't like an action game. And in fact, it was so different from what Dead Rising is in terms of engine and scope and scale. To close off the episode for the night, I wanted to talk a little bit about the game dev stuff, because I feel like this is like a little weekly corner where you guys can kind of pick my brain a little bit. I've been doing a lot of stuff with Godot, and I'm learning a lot about small projects. So I think that's the best way to kind of like learn. And I've been looking through forums, I've been looking through tutorials, and a lot of the stuff that people are recommending is that you need to start with a different engine. And it's like, I know. Personally, I think, especially for somebody that me is more of a visual learner, I'm not too hands-on. I think with programming though, like you kind of have to be more hands-on than anything. So I think working on like small projects, like things that you can just feasibly do to kind of learn the ins and outs of like what these commands and what these prompts are even doing. That's been like a huge help. I've adjusted the scope of my main project. I'm going to shelf the extraction shooter for now, because I want to learn more about the systems that I want to include in that. Initially, I had an idea that I was just going to develop a side project while I was developing the extraction shooter project, but from what I was suggested, it would be good to just focus on these fundamental parts that I want to work on. So I'm going to shelf the extraction shooter project. This new project that I'm doing, which shouldn't take nearly as long to develop, and I should have like a working demo pretty soon to like show everybody. This new project that I'm working on it's a turn-based, pseudo turn-based action RPG. It's a roguelike. It's going to feature a bunch of classes. There's going to be skills that you can use to fight the enemies with, and the whole idea is that you travel between acts, and you kill an act boss, and when you kill a act boss, you'll have a score that basically lets you know like how well you did in this act, and you'll have like your own personal leaderboard. I don't know how to like implement like online features yet. That's something I do want to learn, but I don't think for this project that's going to be feasible. But there will at least be a leaderboard that you can see like how well you did in that act with that hero, or with all of your heroes that you've played so far. Heroes being the classes. So far, I've developed a tile system in which the characters move on the map. I'm working on sprites and just general map layout. I'm trying to, with this project, I want to learn about the RPG mechanics that I want to add, like skills, skill trees, experience, and inventory, because these are things that I just don't understand and I can't wrap my head around. As far as like smaller projects, which has been helping me learn a little bit more about Python and just generally GD script. Developed a few just smaller games. Like I think everybody kind of just starts with like Pong. So I learned how to do Pong. I feel like every game design class that I ever took, I'm always like designing Pong in like some way. I feel like I've designed Pong in like every engine aside from Unreal at this point. Ditto is no different. I think that's the best way to do it. And there's also been a lot of people that have been kind enough to like explain things like workflow to me. It's like, do you have a GitHub? I'm like, oh yeah, I do. So yeah, you're going to want to use your GitHub for just general updates to what you're doing. You're going to want to develop a workflow map. So they suggested things like Trello, which was like very nice because I didn't know anything about that. And I was just kind of winging it. Like, okay, here's what I want to do. Here's what I want to work on. But I have no way of like tracking these systems. That wasn't something I ever even fathomed that I would have to do. I came up with my game design document. So I knew that much at least. Like, here's the scope. Here's what I want to do. Here's the outline. Here's the limitations. Here's the people that I'm trying to reach with this. Here's how I'm doing this. Here's the way I'm funding this project. I'm not, because it's just a one-man thing that I'm doing on my time. Once I have a demo, I might put out like a Patreon for it. I think for the people in my circle, I'll just hand out builds if they're interested in looking at my progress. But I think I'd put out a Patreon at that point, and I would do, every month I would have like a build that people can look at and play around with until I'm actually ready to release the projects in full. I think that would be a good way of doing it, and it keeps me afloat on continuing to work on it. But that's future problems. I've gotten the basis of what I want to do down for this current ARPG. I can't wait to show the demo of that the sprites are coming together pretty nice, and I was working on an enemy design, and I finally got that down. So I want to have a complete proof of concept of like the combat and a working skill, a working GUI to let the player know, like, hey, you just picked up this item. Do you want to equip it? Do you want to sell it? Do you want to just leave it on the ground for now? That's going to be pretty fun in the coming weeks when I can actually show this stuff off. And it's cool because I'm just learning. That's all you really can do. But that's going to do it for this episode, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you guys next time.